All right, so it's Android introduction, although we've already done the Hangman sort of Android stuff, but I wanted to bring it back and have a look at a bit more basic information about Android and work our way around it. So yeah, just to sort of cover a few things that we didn't cover just in the tutorial. A couple of important terms is activity intent and the AVD. AVD, which is the emulator you've got running, that's the virtual device. Activity is the user interface. We did that in the Hangman game. We created two, the game activity and what was the other one? The main activity and game activity. I think they were the two, yeah. So those two, they were the two activities. Now, an activity is both the XML and the Java combined. And so that's sort of one activity is sort of one screen with code behind it. And the intent is an object that's passed between activities. And so when you want to go from one activity to another, you run an intent. And that's, you intend to open up a new activity. That's the sort of the way you think about it. You intend to do something and then you activate it. Okay, so there's two main parts which we've already seen. There's Java for the code, XML for the interface. Okay, we've all seen that with our Hangman. And these are sort of the four main sections that you guys will be worrying about. Your Java code up the top, your resources under drawable. Most of the stuff we're going to be doing can just go into HTTPI. And that's sort of where I put it unless I need to move it somewhere else. So unless I tell you otherwise, or unless it doesn't work for you, put everything in that folder, or your pictures and things like that. The layout is your user interface, and the values. I've selected strings there. We looked at that very briefly in Hangman, but that was where we you put in the values there so you can easily localize your code, so you can change the language but leave the variables the same, and it just selects the string XML that is right for the language. Yes?
Just a quick question. If we have a comment or a question on like the video, if we go to YouTube and look at it, should we comment on the actual comments? Like,
you can if you want. I don't really mind. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends. If you want your comment to be public, go for it. If you want it just to be an email to me, then that won't be public. So it depends on what you want.
yeah, in terms of will you share?
I haven't, but no one. I don't think anyone's actually commented on my videos on YouTube yet. But anyway. So yeah, they're the sort of four main sections that you'll need to be accessing throughout this semester. Now, one of the other conceptual things that we need to talk about, we've talked about sort of objects and classes. They're all conceptual in terms of we have to think about it. It's all sort of stuck in your head and you have to code according to that. This new one is more about Android rather than object-oriented programming, but it's a similar sort of thing. It's called the Model View Controller. And basically, this is a concept or a way of setting up your Android, and this works for iOS as well, and other setups. But it's basically separating the user interface from everything else. And there's reasons why you do that. You want to keep them separate. So you separate the data from the user interface. So, so the user interface, someone can design the user interface and they don't care about what the data does. They don't care about how the code works. They design the user interface. But, and they just sort of say, it's going to run this command. They don't really care. The interface doesn't run into commands. It just sends a message to say, I've been told to run this message. And you guys work it out from here. The code does the rest. Excuse me. So, the controller, there's a controller class, which is your game activity .java file. That's almost your controller. That controls the interface and the code that runs based on which buttons are pressed or what's entered. And the model is your data. So the classes that you guys design, like the vehicles, that would be storing data. That's your model. Okay, so model and data is the same thing, basically. So it's sort of separating the data from the user interface, and the controller does the controlling of the flow of information. So yeah, in Android terms, model will be an object, like your vehicles, animals, or whatever it's going to be, library books, whatever. The user interface is the XML, and the controller is the activity code. There's my stupid picture that goes with this. I couldn't find any funny picture about model view controller. This was the closest I could find. So yeah, anyway. Alright, so model view controller. So these are the sort of three sections of it. Model, remember, is the data, your objects. Controller is your Java code for your activity. And the view is your XML, the interface. So the view can send a message to the controller. It can say, someone pressed my buttons really well. Someone pressed a button. And I'm sending this command. Like in the Hangman, we had the command, I think it was just button pressed. I can't remember what it was. But it just sends a message to the Java code saying, someone pressed this, and I'm told that you should run this code. And for the people that, because I did the same thing when you didn't write that code in properly, if you had a typo, your app crashed in the emulator. That's what's happened. It just says, the code says, the controller says, I don't know what to do with it, I'm crashing. So, but yeah, it sends a message back saying, I've been told to do something. The controller might do something with the data, either retrieve it or update it. And the model then tells the controller, I've updated my data, or here's my data, here's the thing you requested. And then the controller tells the view, okay, the data's been updated, here's the new data. So it could be something like, you know, a button says load data, and it's loading a username out of just a string. It doesn't have to load from anywhere, it's a string variable. You press the button and it says, okay, load it up from the variable, which is your model. The controller says, okay, view, here's the string you requested, and it displays on screen your name. So it can be really simple, it can also be really complex. And depending on how complex your program is, you could have multiple model view controllers in your whole application. And you could actually have multiple controllers for each model and each view and things like that. So it's not a one-size-fits-all sort of system. I just wanted to give you an idea of this is what you should be designing your code around. So your model is all your Java classes, all your data, that sort of thing. Your view is the interface, and the controller is the code that coordinates everything almost. So here's an example of a very simple Java code. Like I said, there's a class that we create called person, and it's a name, address, and age, and they're the only three things in the class. There's nothing else, and at the moment that's a class. But when you look at the code in the controller, it actually creates a user here. It creates a user variable or an object of type person. So it actually creates, it instantiates that object in memory and stores it into user. And we're setting the name, the line underneath that, user.setName is Paul, user.set address is 123 Fake Street. By the way, that's fake, if you didn't work that out. And user.setAge. So I'm just setting the variables, that's all I'm doing. We'll look at how you do that sort of code probably next week at this stage. But maybe on Friday. But yeah, so that's just setting the variables. And the next block of code, this stuff here, is just setting up all the connections to these text views and the button. So very similar to what we had in the Hangman game, just sort of a lot simplified. So we've set up text name, text address, and text age to connect to these three text boxes, and then I'm setting the values to be the name, address, and age. Okay, we'll learn how to do that either today or Friday. But and then there's one method down the bottom, which is increase age, and that runs a method which basically adds 1 onto the value of the age. That's all it does. It's just not shown here. And then sets the variable back. So anyway, so when we set the age there, well, this is where I spend way too much time doing animations, because this presentation, because I couldn't find any funny pictures, I spent too much time on animation. But yeah, so anyway, so you get the age, which retrieves it from the model, and then you set the name in the text box up there. So the controller is the one that coordinates the communication between the model and the view. And then that one, very exciting. You press the button, it runs that method because that's what's set up in your XML. And then, wow.
What kind of budget do you have?
This took me all weekend. No, as I said, I couldn't find any good pictures. And I like putting funny pictures in my presentations because I get bored when I do these. So I concentrate on my special effects budget. I had to sell my car to do that, to afford that.
You should have the decrease age button. It accidentally double taps the increase age button.
I could, but this was just an example. Yeah. Very rarely do people go down in age, though, in real life.
Yeah, no, but if someone double taps the increase button accidentally and they go up 2 years instead of 1,
Yes.
then they'll have to go back down 1.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. In a real situation where the address is not Fake Street, you might have a decrease age button. You probably wouldn't be able to increase someone's age by pressing a button on screen anyway.
Yeah.
It would be more of a date of birth calculation kind of thing. But this was just an example.
Still not very user-friendly.
Shush. No, it's not supposed to be user-friendly. It's just supposed to show the example of the model view controller. Shut up. You're on my list, both of you.
I was on a good list.
Now, let's see if this works. Let me see. Is it going to work? Oh, look at that. I've got a video in here. Whoa. And you can see, oh, look, it's increasing.
Woo! Wow.
Paul gets very old very quickly.
Yeah.
Isn't that exciting? So, yeah, that's what the model view controller is. That's what I wanted to sort of get across to you. It's kind of almost forced upon you with Android because you do have that Java class, the Java file separate from the user interface, and you create object space from that. But I just want to get in your head that's what you're supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be separate. You don't want the view touching the person at all, which you don't want to touch people anyway. That's touching people unless they're friends. That's a bad idea. Okay. There's good touching and there's bad touching.
What if you were to press someone on the shoulder so that you could, ask them to move out of the way?
I don't know. All right.
Like on the bus.
Creating new Android projects. Now, we did this for Hangman, but I wanted to talk about in general. When you create the project in Eclipse, you give it a name, pretty basic. The 4 options in the block in the middle, the minimum required SDK and the target SDK, they're going to be different for yours. I think we've just set it to 4.4, which is probably API 20. Doesn't matter. Doesn't make any difference for what we're using. But if you have your Android phone or tablet and you want to run your code on that, we have to muck around with that sort of thing to get that to work. So if you do have an Android tablet and you want to run it on, we'll have to change those values. But basically, you just leave those as default. And yeah, so you just give it a name. The strings we looked at, so don't worry too much about that one. User-defined strings, again, we looked at that. You put the @string in front, so that will load up that string.xml file and look for hello_world and display whatever's stored in there. All right. We're going to look at some code snippets now. Not really a funny picture, but it's Star Trek and it's an Android. So you get it? Because he's an Android, and we're doing Android. Get it? Get it? Yeah? Yeah? Android? Yeah. Yeah. Do you want me to explain it again?
Yes.
Okay. Lieutenant Commander Data, the one in the middle, he's a robot or an android. Now we're writing code for Android phones and tablets. And see, it's Android. It's all connected, man. It's all connected. And he's got a phone in his chest. This was the episode, by the way, where Data was having dreams for the first time. Just wanted to point that out because I remember that episode. Well, he was having weird dreams. Anyway, all right. So this how you configure the screen. You can either or the button on your view. Either you edit the XML on the left by adding an Android on-click attribute, or you set it up in the properties. We did that in the Hangman one, but I just wanted to show you that there. So when you edit the XML, you can add that in manually or do it over there. But whatever button pressed, whatever that says there, where it says button pressed, that's going to be the method that it runs in the code, which is there. So it looks for button pressed with view as the argument. You have to have that there, otherwise your program will crash. And then whatever's in between the brackets, that runs that. And this, what the toast.make text does, is actually just pops text up on screen. It's like a temporary alert, almost, notification.
Why are you super smart?
Because I think I was watching.
Super smart.
I think I was watching The Simpsons when I did that. Remember where he says, "I am so smart, I am so smart." S-M-R-T. I mean S-M-A-R-T. So yeah. Anyway.
And 1, 2, 3,
I understood the reference.
Was it?
Yeah.
Maybe I was watching The Simpsons throughout this whole present. Why didn't I put Simpsons in here then? More references to The Simpsons. I don't know. So yeah, it has to include the view argument. It doesn't have to be. I don't think it has to be view v. It could be view anything. It just has to. It has to accept view as an argument. But I think by standard you just put view v there. Anyway, not just for buttons. You can do all sorts of things. You can have all sorts of elements to say on click. All right, intents. There we go. There's my other funny picture. Get it? It's intense.
I made that joke.
I know, and I didn't want to because that was already in there. I knew it was there. So yeah. Anyway, as I said, an intent is the way you get from one activity to another. You have the two activities written in code and the XML and all this stuff, and you set up the intent object. An intent can also send and receive information as well. So you can pass information between activities through an intent. An intent is just a data type. It's just an object you create. So you create a new activity. This one's called imaginatively second activity. And when you go to file new Android activity or whatever it's called, this is the screen that comes up, and you just enter some whatever the name is. But in your button press method that we created previously in the other slide, this is the code to get it to open up a new activity. Intent I, again, the I can be anything. That's probably a bad name for a variable, but you have it intent I, new intent, get application context, second activity or host. Look, I don't know what this does. Honestly, I don't know what it does. I know you have to have it there though. So put it there, and whatever the second activity, whatever you call your second activity, that's what you put there. Okay, so that's the only bit that would change really on this line. And then once you've set that up, you start activity, and that would just display the user interface. Okay, so it's really easy to get to display another screen. Excuse me. If you wanted to send some information, it's pretty much the same. This line is exactly the same, but you can actually put extra, like I.put_extra, which is putting extra information, almost. You add information to it. And there's two bits of information you need for this put extra. And you can do it for multiple different things. I'll show you in Eclipse in a little bit. But info1, in this case, that is it's an identifier. It's kind of hard to explain. It's like a variable, but it's something you can refer to that later when you receive the data. So it's like the strings.xml. You give it like a short name version of it, and then that retrieves the rest of the information. So it's similar to strings. So info1, I can refer to info1 later, and that will actually be the string. This is the string that is sent. And then you start the activity, just like before. So that's how you send data. To receive data in your second activity, in the onCreate method, what I've got here is the first two lines after the protected void onCreate. They're the standard ones that created automatically. The next four, I'm just creating two string variables. You have to have another intent to retrieve the intent in the second activity. And then I've just got intent from main, which is the name of the intent. Get string extra info1. And then I'm just making it pop up on screen. So when you run your second activity, you get this is the string that is sent. Okay? So,
You did this intentionally.
sorry, what?
I said you
Everything I do is intentionally. Everything.
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 Anything?
Yeah, sure. So anyway, so it's not that hard to retrieve information either. It's an extra couple of lines of code, and you just have to remember you have to recreate or create another intent object to receive the data, and then whatever you put in info1, that's going to retrieve. This is the string that is sent, that's shown up there. So. And this code snippet here that I took a screenshot of is actually from the program that did that, so it does actually work, which is surprising. Anyway, if you want to open intent and expect to get some data back, like your second activity is going to get an answer from the user and then return it back to your main activity, you set it up exactly the same way, except, like this line is exactly the same, this line hasn't been changed either, this line is different. Start activity for result. So you're saying I'm expecting some data back. And I can't remember, I is still your intent, but I can't remember what the number 1 does. I just know you need it there. And then you have another method in there on activity result, which returns the information. So and it's the same way, get string extra result, and I'm just popping that up on screen. And in your second activity, when you've got a close activity method, you just create another intent. So you're going to have intents all over the place in your code. You create another intent, add on this extra value, the result intent, or put extra, and then you send it back and you finish, and that closes the activity down. And then you get this. Open second activity. Look, no hands. Look at that. Oh, look at that. And then close. Woohoo, this has been returned. Very exciting. All right, any questions on that? Liam's already finished. He's ready to go. Okay, what I want you to do now is I want you to create a new project, and I want you to create, on the main activity, have an interface where it has a text view which collects a username, or it doesn't matter what it is, it just collects a piece of text, as a string, and then sends that to a second activity to display it as a toast pop-up or in another text view or a label. I don't really care what it is. Have a muck around with it, get it to do both, and then send back the initials back to the first activity. So there's going to be a bit of code manipulation, some text, mucking around with the string. But first of all, get the code to send, or first of all, collect the user's name, then send it to the second activity, and then work out how to strip out everything else but their initials, and then close the activity and send it back to the main activity. Okay, so that's what I want you to work on for the rest of this lesson. We've got an hour and a half left. That's what I want you to finish up on. Any questions? Nope? Okay, excellent. Absolutely, it's an open book exercise.